Hey, Catherine, welcome to Work-Life.
Thank you for having me, Eric.
Hey, it's great that you're here. It's a crazy day across the U.S. I think I heard something like 70% of the country is covered in snow today. But more importantly, I ran out of coffee, and so that's my primary concern to get fixed today. Coffee and gin.
Yeah,
If
that's a
you
huge
can't
problem.
start the morning or end the day correctly, it doesn't bode well.
Huge problem if you can't start off with a cup of coffee and then, gosh, I hope you have gin on reserves for the end of the
Yeah,
day.
I've clearly not planned well enough, so I need to correct those problems today. Hey, it's great to have you on your show. When we first connected through a service called Podmatch, one of the things that caught my attention was that you said that you're a recovering banker, and I've spent so much of my career in financial services. To kick things off today, I'd love it if you could just sort of give a short synopsis. How did you get started, and where did you end up today?
Yeah, it's hard to make something short when it
I
took 20
know.
plus years,
I
but
know that's
yeah,
true.
we can totally go down that path. If I had to do a short synopsis, I spent over 20 years in banking. I started out as a bank teller back when it was Nations Bank,
Oh yeah.
and yeah, and then transitioned into some pretty creative lending through a financial company that is no longer around, and that ended up getting absorbed by Wells Fargo. From there, I went to a local bank within the Southeast. So I traveled around our local 5 states around the Southeast and did that for 12 years. And the last 8 years of my banking career was actually within farm credit. And that allowed me to travel around the country and learn about agriculture and rural communities. And the one beautiful thing about banking is it opens up doors because everybody needs money. And I got to have a wide experience at a number of businesses, and I'm grateful for my time there.
Isn't it interesting when you talk about that career progression and you talk about opening doors? When you started out as a bank teller and then you get the opportunity to sort of get into the agricultural sector towards the end of your banking career, who would have predicted that, right? It's not sort of where your eyes would have been set when you first started out in that role.
Yeah, it just starts with curiosity, and people who know me, they know I'm just curious, and I'll kind of chase that for a little bit and see where it goes. And I had wonderful experiences helping other people grow their business, and you get to learn so much along the way, especially when teams and departments are starting from scratch. And you have to put the customer first, and you have to figure out what their struggling moment is. And then we figure out how do we solve that and how do we reverse engineer into that. And that curiosity, it just got me started, and I just kept following it.
I love the way you phrase that, because I think too often nowadays when we think about banks, we think about big Wall Street banks. We think about all the money that flows into corporations. But really, banks are what funds small businesses, and small businesses are the heart of this country and the heart of this economy. And really, that's why there were so many of these local bank branches in every town that you would drive through, right? They were really the foundation of those local economies. And I'm sure you see a lot more of that once you get out into the rural parts of the country.
Yeah, we joke that they're overbanked. So you have all these rural communities, and you may have 14 banks for maybe 7,000 people in the city. And it's hard for them to stay viable within some of these environments. So relationships and putting people first and leading with value has always been important in banking, but it's more important. It's important everywhere we go.
Did you see a real change? You talked about working for several organizations, Nations Bank, which is now Bank of America, and companies being acquired by Wells Fargo and whatnot. As these companies sort of got swallowed up, got bigger, expanded, did you see real changes in the corporate culture that at some point made you think, maybe I want to do something a little different?
Yeah, in the beginning, it was fun and exciting, just like you were in banking, and you get that experience and you get to travel, and it's a lot of fun. And then management changes, and people always say people don't leave jobs or roles, they're leaving the manager. And when it transitioned in one of those roles, I got a new manager, and I was tightly aligned with my previous manager. He had been there for 10 years. We had created things from nothing, and it was so fun. And you work long hours, you're solving problems, you're growing business. And when he retired, I learned that I was too closely aligned to him. So when the new manager came in, it just wasn't the best fit for me at that time. So that's pretty much what triggered it. And when change happens, you have to pay attention. And I thought it was going to be okay. But when I sat in a meeting and I had a comment, and I like to test the waters and just ask, I've got a suggestion to add to this strategic initiative that we're talking about. I'd like to share it. And when the C-suite folks don't want to listen, or they just choose to ignore it, and it's pretty obvious that, I've got a suggestion, and they choose not to listen, I've got to take that as a red flag and know that, okay, no hard feelings. It's been fun, but now I've got to get something together, and we've got to start thinking about my future, because it's run its course here.
Yeah, that's so interesting, and I can certainly relate to that. There are a lot of nonverbal cues, right, that happen throughout your career, and sometimes looking back, it seems so obvious that change was imminent, that something was not right anymore, and it was time to move on, look for a different challenge. But sometimes in the heat of the moment, that's really hard. It's hard to leave that security. It's hard to leave what that daily routine, and branch off and do something different, especially if it's going to be something on your own. So what sort of gave you the power to push through that and really try something new?
There were a lot of different powers that kind of helped me get there. And I think people want to have some big blow up story of how it went down. And I just said I quit and walked out the door. And that is so far from the truth. We're still in conversations, and I still serve those clients that I had when I was at the bank. And it's truly a privilege to be able to serve them, even though I don't work for the bank, and serve them in leadership capacity and leadership training. So, the time comes, and I'm very, I guess, calculated, and I like to take calculated risk. And what I learned is, a few years before I knew I was going to take the jump, I hired a coach myself, and she helped me navigate what in the world am I going to do, and be okay that what I'm going to do may not be the end of the story. It just may be the beginning that triggers something else. And, we would meet every couple weeks, and she would give me a few more steps to follow. And it energized me, and it kind of gave me a hope, and I got a little bit of momentum. And from there, it goes from there. And then the day comes where you're actually going to turn in your resignation letter. My husband said, are you really going to do this? Because this is all you've ever done, and you're going to be bored out of your mind. You're used to, going all the time. I said, no, I'm ready. Like, I have done all these steps that have led me to this. I can't wait. And I don't know what it's going to look like. And I'm going to have to put faith in my network, and just kind of faith in the universe that this is going to work out. But I know that I've done everything I can now, and I want more out of life. And I don't want to look back at 60 and 70 and wish that I had left, just like we sit around in corporate meetings and we all say, oh, one day I'm going to leave. Well, one day I did leave, and there's still good people that are working there that do great work. But I put one foot in front of the other and explored it and let it kind of happen. And here we are.
One of the things I loved about what you said there, well, two things actually, is you saw the change was coming, and so you started to prepare for it. You just didn't do this cold turkey. You hired a coach. You started to go through that coaching process, and then at some point you felt ready to sort of cut the ties and go off on your own. And I think a lot of people that I've talked to, myself included, we sort of just took the plunge, right? We didn't sort of have that pre-work done. And so it was a lot of very quick on the job learning to be able to be an entrepreneur, to start out on your own. When you coach clients, when you work with others, mentor others, is this something that you see is pretty common, that more people take the, just jump right in approach rather than carefully planning it out ahead of time?
What I like about the method that I use for coaching, it's called stakeholder center coaching, and there's very much a process behind it that leads to 95% effectiveness of being recognized as a leader. And what comes from it is a process. And so when we stick to the process, just like if we're going to lose weight, we're going to go to the gym, we're going to eat less food. So, we stick to a process, and we just try to minimize the impact on what we have to do. And test things, minimal viable product, MVP. We talk a lot about that when we're developing products at the bank. And, what's an MVP that we can test, this leadership coaching idea? What's this idea that we can test within a coaching environment and not have to go full in. So there's ways to be able to create some small tests before going fully in. And I think going fully in probably scares too many people. And if we're truly going to create change, we've got to start with these small steps and test it and see if it's going to work.
The other thing that I thought was very interesting in what you said is you talk about building a network and the importance of having a network, building those connections, because some of those people that you may have worked with in a previous role, they might become your clients if you decide to go off on your own as an entrepreneur, as a coach or whatnot. Can you just share a little bit about the importance and how, that's affected you once you've come out and become an entrepreneur?
So networking is vital, and I think men know how to network better than women in general. There's also a difference between sponsors and mentors, and this is something else that's a gender difference, and it works within corporate, it works when you're out on your own. A mentor is usually what women have, and a mentor is somebody that they can troubleshoot ideas to. When it comes down to personally to you and to your career, you've got to find sponsors. And the sponsors are the people that have your back when you're not in the room. And just like when you step out of corporate, who's going to rehire you are going to be your sponsors, the people that believe in you. It's not going to be the people necessarily that are your mentors. They can only take you so far. But when you're not in the room, especially, now more than ever, as there's more remote working taking place, we have to find these sponsors throughout our network. And when people reach out to you and they want to help and be able to have a clear message, a clear ask. I just had a phone call early this morning with somebody that was my neighbor 20 years ago. He saw my newsletter that went out and he said, "How can I help?" And so that's an example of just networking and leading with value, because he reads, just the newsletters and tidbits that I send out. And he's cheering me on. He's like, "Yeah, you tell me what you need." And I very clearly said, if you can make 1 or 2 introductions, that's all. That would be like gold. And then I replied back to him, "How can I help you?" And he's in a different phase of his career. And I'm sure when that need pops up, he's got a daughter that's coming out of college. So, you find ways to lead with value and help other people. And again, it's just paying it forward with value within the network and finding those sponsors that have your back throughout.
I couldn't agree more about the power of a network. And it's something that honestly worries me right now, because there's such an emphasis, especially with younger generations, on likes and followers and friends. That's not really a network. A network is really built on relationships. And it sounds like the story about your neighbor is a classic example of that. Here's somebody you might not have been in that much contact with, and then out of the blue, they come in and offer something of value. There's a relationship there.
Yeah, it kind of humbles you, makes you kind of step back. And throughout the years, I had a lot of people that helped me through my career, and I'm still getting lots of help. But you want to be able to give back. And I got to that point within corporate. I thought, how can I give back the way people have given to me? Because these people that helped me pave the way, they're all retired and they're on to the next phase of life. So how can I pay it forward? And I choose to do that by helping the next generation that's with me or behind me or around me, and be able to help them, whether it's through a connection, an introduction, sharing information that could be helpful to them.
We like to talk about, the career side of people's lives as well as the personal side. And I'm sure anytime you're going from a career job in a corporate environment, and then you're switching out to something on your own, it certainly impacts life at home, right? Your relationships, the time that you have to spend with your family. Talk to me a little bit about how that transition has been for you, and what really drives you on the personal side of your life.
I think in the core, I'm just a very competitive person. I love to win. I love to help other people accomplish what they want to do, because it's just fun. It makes them happy. And I love to be able to deliver results. And my husband has always been an entrepreneur. And so this has been something, I've supported him through a number of businesses. And we've been married for 22 years this year. And it just felt like a natural progression. He's, stabilized and is in just a really good place. And I've just always said it's going to be my turn one day to retire or recover from banking. And I think people thought when I said that that meant I was going to stay at home and read magazines and update a Pinterest board or something.
Right, right.
They just kind of joke. They're like, well, what do you do all day? And I'm like, well, I get to talk to Eric on podcasts. It's pretty
Yeah,
cool.
there you
And I get
go.
to work with coaching clients and help them accomplish their goals. But I get to do it. I get to work with people I want to work with. And it's been a really great opportunity. And it's kind of funny. My husband, he's supporting, this idea. And we've worked hard to get to where we are. But I remember when the first big check came in, and I use his office for the mailing address. And by God, he's extremely busy. He's got a lot of businesses. And he drove that thing home and he gave it to me, and I opened it up and I was like, look at this. It just got real. He said, holy moly, that did get real. I said, I know, it's going to be fun. So it was just a good feeling.
Oh, I bet. Yeah, that's really exciting when you can see the fruits of your labors and see that the chart that you've or the course that you've charted is really starting to pay off in real material ways. And, one of the things that interests me is that, when you talk about your husband as being sort of a serial entrepreneur, having multiple businesses, oftentimes people get asked, are you born an entrepreneur? Is it just something that is a mindset that you're born with? And I don't believe so. I believe you can really grow into being an entrepreneur. But one of the things that I see about people with that entrepreneurial spirit is that they often do multiple projects. They often start multiple businesses, try different things. They're not afraid to get out there, try things, pivot, do things differently. Have you seen that as well, just in your own experience?
Yes. So I think he was born an entrepreneur.
Really?
He's been an entrepreneur since he was 14, and he could get a lawnmower and go around town. And he actually would sub it out he had employees at the age of 14. So he's, managing his lawn care business at 14, which I think is hilarious. But yeah, even today, he's got 4 or 5 businesses that he's running and growing. And you've got to make a lot of hard decisions of when do you cut it loose and when do you go all in. And then me on the other side, I've been in corporate America for 20 plus years. And so my brain has always just worked, you climb the ladder, you report in, you do what you got to do. And at the end of it, after a lot of self-exploration, I just want flexibility and I want freedom. And the more I reflected on it, the more I thought about it. Entrepreneurism is a way to do that. And so understanding, your finances and how much money you truly need to live off of, and save the second you get out of school and just start saving money, because your living expenses are so low right now. When you get out of school, when you as soon as you can, just start packing it away. Because your living expenses, if you can maintain that in the beginning, it's going to reap rewards and freedom for you later. And we took 2 different approaches on life and careers. And at the end of the day, now we're both doing what we love, which is the freedom to be able to be an entrepreneur.
One of the things that's interesting about what you said there is that the term banker's hours literally came about because banks were pretty rigid in the hours that, employees would work, and it was very dependable. You could always go to a bank and know when they would be open. And one of the reasons that a lot of people decided to become entrepreneurs is they wanted that flexibility. They wanted that freedom. And then all of a sudden COVID hits, and so many people, whether they're in that more traditional corporate job or they're an entrepreneur, have been working from home, have been doing business by Zoom. And so I think a lot of people have gotten the taste of that freedom, of that flexibility, that it doesn't have to be, commuting for an hour, going to the office, buying lunch at the corner deli, waiting through traffic to come home, and then being stressed and tired when you get home at the end of the night. I think this is going to usher in a whole new idea of what it means to work in a corporate environment. And I think it's going to push a lot of people to explore more entrepreneurial opportunities.
You're dead on it, Eric. The world is about to change, whether we're ready for it or not. And the only way that this could really get held up is reliable broadband. And across the country, across the world, how are we going to communicate if people are tired of being packed into high rises all day and all night? How can we allow them to have space to breathe and to grow? And we're going to see a full swing going back to the country and back to these rural communities. And we're going to think they're rural because we're used to living, in high rises and impact areas. But even when I go to New York City, they have their own, you could consider, network and block that they live in. It's just when you take it to a rural community, it's the same people that you run into around your block, in New York. You just have more options. And I think it's going to be really interesting to see what that impact is going to do for the infrastructure of the country and probably around the world.
I love that. That's such a great segue to sort of where we like to end up on the podcast, which is really talking about, balance within your life, what gives you fulfillment, what's a passion for you. And I know that bringing, high-speed access to rural communities is one of these passions for you. I was so interested to see in the news, I believe it was last week, where an older gentleman took out a full-page ad, I think it was in the Wall Street Journal, complaining to AT&T that he still had this incredibly slow DSL, access. And I think he lived out in California someplace, a place that you didn't necessarily expect it to be slow. But he was like, what's up with this? Why aren't you investing in speeding up these connections to our homes, especially at this time? And lo and behold, he got the internet access within about a week. They ran a special line to his house. Clearly, everybody can't spend $10,000 on an ad in the Journal to get that kind of a message out. But what's happened? Why has there been so little attention to infrastructure spending?
I think there is a lot of attention. I think there's an opportunity for greater education for us to fully understand what's out here. There's a comparison 100 years ago when we went from kerosene lanterns to electricity, that this is going to be the next electricity, and this stuff just doesn't happen overnight. And it's been interesting. So when I traveled to rural communities, what I saw was tons of talent in these communities. And most of the time, because of the space and the ruralness of it, you've got farmers that you're working with. And if you've ever been out on a farm, it is an unbelievable amount of technology. And they're using this technology in order to keep us fed and happy and not hangry and running around, doing bad things. So for them to continue to feed us and nourish us, we're going to have to get them access to reliable internet and reliable broadband. Even in South Carolina, where I'm based, our capital is Columbia, and we have a pocket, literally we have a pocket right now of 500,000 people that can't get internet in downtown Columbia, in the state capital, can't get it if they wanted it. And so it's literally, you find these gaps and then you begin to attack it one step at a time. What can we do? So when I was at my farming bank, they had a lunch and learn, and I just showed up and asked questions and learned about what they had. And I learned, my first step was learning about vertical assets. And those are the water towers, the grain bins, the fire towers that are all around. Those are real estate towers. And you can sell sections of these towers off to providers. And at the end of the presentation, I just asked him, to the presenter, I said, I know I don't have reliable broadband where I am. Can you run one of those maps and tell me how many gaps we have in our community? And so, gosh, I want to say it probably took, he was busy with other projects, and this was just a curiosity thing. And we stayed in touch. 4 months later, he reaches back out. He's like, yeah, y'all got some big problems there. And I said, yeah, I kind of figured as much. He said, have you heard of the Reconnect grant? I said, no, what's that? He said, it's through the United States Department of Agriculture. And President Trump was putting out $600 million through USDA to help close the broadband gap in these communities. And my husband jokes, he's like, nobody gets federal grants. That's like catching a unicorn. It's not going to happen. Don't waste your time. Just go back to the bank and control what you can. So this curiosity process led me to pull together a group of individuals within our community in education and agriculture, in medical and workforce development. They all came around the table and I asked, do we need reliable broadband for our future? And despite all the backgrounds and difference of opinions, that was one thing we could all agree on. And so that was just the first step that led to much more that really is reaping some big rewards for us now.
I think it's a great point that you make too, that Farms are very high-tech operations. The equipment they use is very high-tech. They want to keep this stuff running basically 24/7 because it's so expensive. And we're also in a period in time, right, with COVID where many families have been forced home for at-home learning. And in areas where there is no broadband access, where people literally can't get on those much dreaded Zoom calls, you're at a real disadvantage. And I think this pandemic has only put the spotlight on this problem more, to say that this is no longer a nice to have. This is a requirement in today's day and age.
Yeah, it's really going to impact the school kids. I have a second grader, and for us living in a rural community, I'm so grateful for our public education. And I don't know if everybody can say that, but what our public education system has done here is they provide one tablet to each kid. And they were one of the first ones that started doing that, gosh, 5 years ago or longer. So I never really kept up with any of it until I have my own child that's in the school system. And when we came back with COVID and we're trying to implement suggestions, they came back and they gave us options, and the school board gave us options, and it was face-to-face. You could still go back 5 days a week. The second option was to be able to do virtual, so you could be at home and still have real time. And then the third option was just on your own. You'll still receive the materials. And we had less than half of our students come back face-to-face. And now since then, we've gone up to about 75% are back face-to-face. And they have worked their tails off trying to figure out how do we overcome these limitations that we've been given, and unlimited funding and limited time. And I have to applaud them with their creativity and solutions to the problem.
That's great. I think you've got a great mission here as well. It's nice to talk to a guest who's doing something a little outside the norm. And I really appreciate what you're doing here and the passion that you have behind it. Clearly, there's a lot of that there. As we sort of come to the end here, I think it'd be really helpful if you could just share a little bit about how people can find you on that wonderful internet that we've just been talking about, how they can get in contact with you and some of the services that you offer.
Thank you. I'm on LinkedIn under Catherine Cantey, and then my website is catherinecantey.com.
Hey, that makes it very easy.
Yes.
Well, this has been fascinating. I really have enjoyed our conversation today. It's fun talking with a fellow banker about that experience, and it sounds like some of your passion projects are really exciting. And I certainly wish you all the best as you move forward.
Thank you, Eric, for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you.